It's Monday, October 10th, 2022. Today's Columbus Day. I'm thinking, Linda woke up this morning on the radio. She said that she was listening to, um, there was talks of some whatever trying to tear down the Columbus statue. Now, Columbus is an Italian American staple in the fabric of our holiday schedule here in whatever parts of that are working. So that frightens me. There were those that said that they had once upon a time when that was under threat, they went there to physically barricade it. I'm just like, I mean, like, again, I don't even get, through Linda, I got the words, but I don't know where these people find one another. I'm struggling. I've been struggling with that my whole life, but to stay in the loop of communication somehow. So I'm thinking upon this morning. There's 60 Minutes had on something I'd never heard of called the Southern Baptist Church. I heard of something called a Baptist. I don't really know what it means. I know it has something to do with the southern part of the United States of America, but North American continent, for that regional distinction as a local. I've heard that they exist. I don't know what they're all about. I don't know how far north they are. They spoke of a point I had never heard. The president of this, what they refer to as SBC, was speaking on separation of church and state very briefly, because I'm trying to learn what that means. I've heard it in a roundabout way, but not ever spoken on in any meaningful way. So I have that reference. He said something about religious persecution, which I've also never heard of spoken of before. I mean, sometimes they'll reference it in the Middle East, but it's like this. That doesn't happen here. That happens far away. They already addressed that here and took care of that here. I mean, like, again, stupid things in the field that have been like, it's almost like the way I feel like the adults that I came to, like, they just didn't talk about it. Leaving one with an impression of just this lost whatever. On 60 Minutes, there was talks of how China sees Taiwan. There was something about there's like 20 million cyber attacks on Taiwan a day. And they were looking towards mainland China as the whatever. And I'm like, And then I'm taking that message and thinking, I want a little island. And I've been hurt by a field of science that is really hard to explain. And then I see at the same time, the NFL is coming out with a reference. They're talking about ataxia, Ataxia, in the sense of after you suffer a concussion. Now, that story in the field that I'm in a way to explain it, so an industry professional who deals with this, I mean, like, there's very highly professional medical professionals just for sports medicine, and they seem to have a much better whatever than what I have access to in the local hospitals in New York. Different level of professionalism. So they're coming out and having a conversation starter. I'm just using that conversation in order to enlighten about something I've experienced in the field, um, which is some kind of high grade weaponry that it was almost like having a stroke where like the magnetics changed in the room, or something was directed at my cephalic region, um, and it was interfering with the ability to hold a thought and the speech portion of the brain, whether it was forced by change in pressure systems and environmental, which I wouldn't put it past the humans in whatever they're doing in cyber warfare, and cyber attacks. But there's different degrees of conversation because the normal idiom that the level of doctors I have access to, they learn things one way. I haven't found that they were very good at bringing things and congregating things together. They seem to write their papers one specific way, and I don't know if that's because they have some whatever alternate agenda, but whatever on that. So they're talking about ataxia, about like this wobbly. I mean, like I'm suffering from that in the streets at this point, and then I'm thinking about soda systems. Somebody on the streets of Bayside was wearing a shirt that said soda systems on it, and I'm thinking of how damaging sodium can be, whether it's sodium bicarbonate, whether it's, I mean, like, there's so many different levels of sodium that I'm not even aware of, and whether it be intoxicating the air, the water, or some food system. I know that there's been talks of the humans that they've intoxicated the food with so much sodium, but that would attack the kidneys. And it would increase the density of the UA in its potency, which is what I'm experiencing now, which is some kind of biological chemical warfare that's being used. I don't know how to explain it any other way. And it's a different form of taxation without representation. Like that's where that word I fixate on it, because I don't know who represents. Is it big pharma? Is it the chemical industry? Is it, I don't know who represents them. Do I want to take on this big, no, I don't. But I also don't want to be martyrized or becoming a martyr in the streets because my health is being taxed by some unknown source that is using some alternate system to argue some self-defense that puts me further in harm's way and in some dystopian whatever. I mean, like, it's a dogfight. I don't know. I'm trying to communicate as like the third head of the dog, because there's two people arguing somewhere, but I seem to be at the losing end of this argument. And I don't know who started it. I don't know what it was about, but I know that my health is being lost. I mean, like, I've lost my ability to even function within society. Like, I don't know where society exists. I don't know where and how, like, I live in a country that's represented by the one-headed bird. How did they lose me? I mean, like, where along the way did they lose me? And why did they lose me? And why was nobody brought, like, why has nobody been able to like find me and help me? Why am I being hunted down and hit with darts of all kinds, and then they know things are going on? I mean, it's it's horrible. It's just, you have no answers. It's just like 1,001 questions and no answers. And so between this Southern Baptist um, conversation that I had never heard of, and like, again, like, church isn't even church in New York anymore. Like, it's no longer, there's so much, and like, I get it. Jesus loves everybody. But I almost feel like that's a backdoor answer between the warlord, the drug lord, and the landlord to take advantage of the good Lord and the good Lord's people. I mean, I never, I mean, like, I don't discriminate. I'm tolerant of whatever is going on, but to what extent? I haven't been able to get employment. They've withheld my, I mean, it's so simple, and they make it like it's something disgusting. I wanted to be a good wife. I wanted to be a good mother. Why do they make that? Like, that's just a punishable offense in modern day. I wasn't able to be any of it. It's really frighteningly sad. And then they won't even listen to your voice unless you've gone to some university, because some section of the population put a priority on that. Although it wasn't my priority, it was somebody else's priority. And then you can't even get gainful employment in order to protect yourself and to be able to move around and have freedom like everybody else. There is a section of the population where, in a hole in space, in a hole in time and space between here and there, where to have your hands tied in ceremony with someone is one of the most spiritually deep and, like, lifelong journey together. I don't understand why that, when that was my pursuit of happiness, I don't understand why that was even withheld. Like, that level of commitment to somebody. Instead, I got ringed to somebody I didn't want, blacksmithed to a whole bunch, like a whole operation. And then I'm thinking of soda systems. I'm thinking of this word OPEC. And I'm like, now, is that Operation Energy Crisis? Is that Operation Emergent Crisis? Is that Operation Migrant Crisis? Where people are leaving elsewhere and just descending upon and pushing their own values and things on another population. And I mean, like, I don't understand martyrism. I don't. I haven't had that much integration into a church. I've been kept in a series of rooms in trying to stay, my parents trying to keep me safe, I suppose, following whatever governance they were able to get word from. So it's just like, I don't even know how to pursue any of that in staying safe and having a value added. It's really frustrating. It doesn't make sense why the one-headed bird would have turned against me in like God, love, um, and family. God, country, and family. It doesn't make sense why the one-headed bird would turn against its own people. None of this world makes sense. It just doesn't. And then watching the idiom come through on the big board and trying to decipher what is it that they could possibly, at brand and brand management, be trying to profess or teach the public that is totally lost, like a shepherd with a lost flock. Looking for answers and needing answers, but not even knowing how to interpret the messages properly is just really frightening. So I'm just using it now as like a conversation starter of conversations humans never had with me. And where is it relevant and pertinent in my real life and my real life experience up until now? Since in this dog fight there was two dogs that were fighting, and there's a third head on this Cerberus in Hades, since someone's martyred me, it feels like, and left me somewhere to die. Here's the conversation that I've never heard of spoken of before in the schools in New York. There was a separation of church and state, and they didn't talk about God ever in school. In Catholic school, there was a theology class, but that was more basic vocabulary and a little bit of the history, a small bit of the history, very basic stuff, and not stuff that's I've really been able, like I couldn't, if somebody gave me a test, I'd probably fail. Um, I'd need like a church representative to speak to for clarity, to remind me and like work through it. Um, with the small amount of exposure and then no reinforcement whatsoever in however things are being handled.
If Mike Pence ran in a primary, you would vote for him in a primary?
There is nothing that would prevent me from voting for Mike Pence in the primary.
We asked Barber what he thinks about the Christian nationalist rhetoric increasingly being used by some elected officials, like Congresswoman Lauren Boebert of Colorado.
The church is supposed to direct the government. The government is not supposed to direct the church.
I don't even know. Like, she looks like she's maybe my age, maybe a little younger than me. I don't know what that means. Like like having a sincere conversation with people out in the universe that do this for a living and are very confident in what they do. I don't have that level of confidence. I have not, it's not been a reinforced staple around here or in my real life. And it's it's frightening because I can see it three ways. I see that they have a hard left, a hard right, and then there's the actual, where is the level of concern in New York? What does the actual demographic look like for systems analysis? What's the turnover? What's the change? How many Christians to how many whatever else is in the field? What secular type of Christianity is being taught versus the basic books of Christianity? And then you've got the Catholic Church, of course, in there as well, They've got a papal state. I know that's incredibly important. But I'm not quite sure how that service integrates in. Again, there's not been very much guidance on this. So I'm trying to just sit here at age 44, trying not to die, trying to figure out where and how to fit in. And there is that between whatever this government word means. I've realized government does not mean the same thing to everybody. Some think it's like a ruling body. Some people feel like it's a movement. Some people feel it's like a managerial position. But it never really is clearly defined. When on the street level, you try to have a conversation, say, well, but what does it look like? What does that mean? Like, put a label on it for me so at least we can construct this reality while we have a conversation. Is it a person? Is it a group? Is it a industry? Is it...
It stands contrary to 400 years of Baptist history and everything I believe about religious liberty. I'm opposed to the idea of Christian dominion, churchly dominion over the operations of government.
Why do you object to that?
Okay.
And on that, at some point, though, like myself, if you're so lost in the field, and especially in a large metropolitan city like New York, where there are buses of migrants from countries you don't know their industry, their history, you don't know what I think they speak is Spanish, but there's 17 different dialects, so I've heard when they put a count on it. I don't know which one. I don't know who they have alliances with. I don't know their drug lord, warlord, landlord system. And I don't know who in good Lord's name sent them here. But now they're here and they're going to be taking over jobs and integrated into the schools. And so now they become part of a working city. And I'm not clear as to how to stay safe within that. And if there are trigger words, if there's things that are going to make them angry, I want to stay away from saying those things. But there's no way for me to even do that because there's no teachings before they get here. They just keep arriving. So in that sense, where do I go for communications? NYPD is silent. It's radio silence with them. They don't inform me. They don't talk to me. There's no public integration with them. There's no one-headed bird like the father of the nation. There's no dad calling out or sending a newsletter or keeping daughter informed. For years, it's been radio silence. I don't know why. That's where the tying of the hands by religious ceremony with the correct somebody special from the beginning who represented the bird would have been really key and stellar. And that's what I thought was keeping me safe. So therefore, that opportunity could be shared between two very deserving people. But that never happened. That's not how the story actually got played out.
Okay. I object to it because Jesus said his kingdom is not of this world. I object to it because historically, every time it's been adopted, it wound up persecuting people like me. It doesn't stop at persecuting people who are not Christians. It eventually winds up persecuting people who are Christians for whom the flavor of their Christianity is different from that of the government.
Support for the separation of church and state was a foundational principle for Baptists who faced religious persecution in England and America in the 1600s. Baptists split in 18...
So that has in there the 16. I know 16 is important. It's It's just a footnote for me at this point, since I'm not quite sure where and who's involved in 16.
1845 over slavery, which is when the Southern Baptist Convention was founded. The SBC supported slavery and later segregation. On abortion, the SBC's opposition has hardened over the years. In 1971, they made exceptions in cases where there was, quote, the likelihood of damage to the emotional, mental, and physical health of the mother. But in 1980, they narrowed that exception only to cases where pregnancy threatened the life of the mother. Bart Barber says he stands by that today.
Our interest with abortion is not to police everybody's sex life. Our interest with abortion is that we believe it's a human person who deserves to live.
And again, that argument, it sounds like has something to do with immigration. Whether you're aborting the mission of having people being sent in this energy crisis, it looks like in theoretically possible, where's the origins of that argument and what is the ways to chase it sideways, in how are the organized criminals persecuting and punishing those of us. It feels like that we're left behind. And then it goes from that to this NFL conversation about ataxia. Now, it is really hard for me to watch this man hit in the head and then get up and walk. Been there. But more recently, when I went to Stony Brook Hospital, that was what I would consider a cyber attack, but not like at the computer terminal level. It's an integrated energy field system of within the stereo field or the heliosphere. Now I have words to describe it in a higher way. But when I went to Stony Brook and was asking, I called Mike Hewson first, but I couldn't even get words out to describe to Mike Hewson how I was being attacked. I stood in Suffolk County Police Department calling Mike Hewson, and he answered. But I choked on my words. I got out who I was, and then I choked on my words because I was being attacked by, I don't know, energy weapon. And then it continued. And so I went to the hospital. And Mike hung up the phone. I couldn't get words out to speak to him, and I hadn't spoken to him in a long time. He's the only one I could think of to call. Then I drove myself to Stony Brook. In there, I was asking for a phone number from their emergency service, like their trauma unit. I walked into their emergency room looking for a trauma specialist to ask them if I needed to speak to a national security person. Where do you find a phone number? And how do you find a phone number to somebody to report something? And then they took me to a bed and put it under as a psychological diagnosis. I'm like, I'm not on drugs, and it's not a psychological, it's something more insidious than that. They also just in how horrible is their health field. They put me in a psychological as opposed to giving me an MRI and even like treating me like a stroke victim. I would have thought would have been the way to go, and to put me into an MRI and check to make sure that they're in brain imaging, that there was no tumors or anything, but they never did that. They just did it a psychological. They tested me for drugs, which I wasn't on, and they tested for, and they just said that I was psychologically damaged. And I'm like, not on your best day. So, I mean, again, that was a Stony Brook hospital. I don't know how to bring action and judgment against them. They denied me a national security rep. They denied me access. I asked several times if someone could contact national security and I needed to speak to somebody, and they denied me in New York, in Long Island.
Over the weekend, the NFL played its first slate of games under the newly revised concussion protocols. The most substantial change adds ataxia, the appearance of imbalance or diminished motor function, to the list of symptoms that immediately remove a player from the field. It follows a joint review from players and the league of the circumstances around Miami Dolphin quarterback Tua Tagovailoa's high-profile concussion more than a week ago.
Now, in this scenario, he's actually hit and goes down, hits his head, and then has a misfiring of neurons and neuromotor function that gets I mean, like, this is easy to diagnose. You see him get hit, you see him like have that spastic moment where you know something deeper neurologically is going on, and then you see him try to recover, but his gait is a little off. And then they also say, by the way, I did not know that their head medical rep goes by the last name of Sill, Sill. That's interesting. Because here in New York, this is the Sill at Masonics and Builders. It's a window sill. For a seal that's got a gigantic white shark with big white teeth, and it's a balancing act. That's how I feel. I am always, it's how I'm always like walking around in New York in the, like, what happened between being handed a book of Joshua from somebody I never met but who actively sought out me and my parents, and now finally in 44 years somebody sent into my path a Book of Mormon and a King James Bible representative. So thank you for that.
Go. We spoke to the NFL's chief medical officer about the new rules and what led to the change.
Given that this is a hard injury to diagnose, and given that sometimes players may not feel like they're in a position to endorse all symptoms, we should err on the side of caution.
11 days after Tua Tagovailoa was carted off on a stretcher, NFL Chief Medical Officer Dr. Alan Seals told us including ataxia in the NFL's updated concussion protocols is intended to be conservative.
There may well be a player who stumbles and doesn't have a brain injury, but would be held out and diagnosed with a concussion. If we're going to make a mistake, we're going to make a mistake on the side of being cautious.
The scenario appeared to play out on Sunday as Dolphins backup quarterback Teddy Bridgewater faced the new guidelines triggered by his teammates' gruesome injury. A spotter noticed Bridgewater stumble following a hard tackle on just his first play of the game, automatically ruling him out.
He doesn't have any symptoms and he's passed his evaluation.
Bridgewater later passed neurological tests administered by doctors, but so did Tagovailoa last month after he visibly struggled to recover from a powerful hit.
Oh, he's woozy. Personal foul. Roughing the passer.
An investigation by the league and its Players Association found that the concussion protocols in effect at the time had...
I just want to make sure he stumbles and wobbles. To me, that's not a psychological disorder. That's a neuromuscular trauma in that moment as a distinction. I had the same, something like that, but without, well, I mean, again, depends on which time we're talking about, but when I was in Stony Brook, there was no physical hit to the head at that time. Not saying that I haven't been hit in the head before or attacked before, but in that particular moment, it was something, whether it be soda system of sodium of some sort, whether it be air pressurized system, some high energy field, I'm not quite sure. But they installed these high power magnets in the area of their across Long Island. They call them cell phone towers. Some, though, are not just on those towers. There are some that are closer towards the surface, Earth, that could change. I mean, technically, you could change magnet polarization and the entire field. So gravity would feel at times, depending on what the cellular makeup is and the sodium pumps being what they are. So theoretically, that level of advancement that they've used in this area, is it being used as as an integrated torture or punishment system that the martyr in this outdoor looks like a regular field is being harmed and somebody's studying it from space or somewhere else? I don't really know. It's possible.
had been followed, but concluded that they produced an unintended outcome in allowing Tagovailoa to play just days later, where he was severely hurt.
We can always improve. The practice of medicine is not perfect, but what our commitment can be is to continue to examine ourselves, see how we can get better, and how we can lead in this area.
I think the league is trying to make the right decision, and we're making progress in this space. It's something that we've heard from our parents a long time ago, which is better safe than sorry. And there might be some players that pass all of the neurological tests, but there's a spotter that's looking at you. And if you're a little wobbly or there's diminished motor function, I say go ahead and sit out. Even though we want to win games and every player is important to that goal, I'd rather a guy be sitting on the sideline and err on the side of caution.
And players are okay with that, like the Players Association, because this is their career. They want to get in there.
Yeah, I think the players are okay with that.
Okay.
Yeah, and the fans should be too. It's better for the game.
Yeah.
All right, coming up next, we'll have the stories that you'll be talking about today. But first, it is 7:46. Time to check your local weather.
We are in for a very...
So, that's what that said. Now I'm going to try to go back to 60 Minutes outside of the church mention, which again, I really thank the president of the SBC for bringing that conversation starter for me up, because I will sit and think on it today, since he's the only access that I have at the moment. Here's the mention of this from Taiwan's point of view.
This kind of threat is our daily life.
Wang Dingyu, a parliamentarian from southern Taiwan, says a kind of war has already started.
China, they try to annex Taiwan for past 50 years.
And again, that word annex, I'm trying to follow it as it pertains, as they're teaching or kind of sort of teaching, or they're having a conversation about it that's above my head. I'm just trying to follow between what an annexation is between Russia and Ukraine. I'm trying to learn as they're bringing whatever small amount of a version of a story through to like this level. I'm trying to learn this vocabulary because this annex, I've recently heard about it as opposed to the telephone company with some expansion that they did. But I had never heard the word, and I really don't know that word in action, how it's used or constructed, but I see that he uses it here again.
They try all different kind of way. Maybe I can give you very concrete figures. There are 20 million cyber attacks per day.
What, per day?
Yes, every day.
Wong, who sits on Parliament's Foreign Affairs and National Defense Committee, took us to a high security lab where engineers track those attacks.
This is Taiwan. A
Okay.
small island, but we're proud of it.
The map shows the attacks from China in real time as they hit Taiwan.
And it's so close to China.
Yeah, unfortunately.
So again, they're speaking of China and Taiwan here, but like on an island, almost like a parable or fable explanation of where Long Island is as opposed to United States of America. So I'm just wondering in my quiet meditation and not knowing why I was attacked so brutally or horribly multiple times throughout my life. I have to think to myself, if they have that level of lab or laboratory, whatever, that knows that these attacks are happening and going on, why am I so left in this vulnerable position without a single representative? It's star 1978, star 8378, Nicole, Cattaruzza. It's Earth, solar system, Milky Way, universe, galaxy is broken, and it's Bayside Station, Bayside, New York, 11361.